We're still in the dog days of the 2024 offseason. The NBA season is right around the corner, but today I want to throw the clocks back a little bit. I want to talk about every team's most forgotten star, in my opinion, since 2000. So you're most likely going to know everybody on this list, right? But when you say a certain team, this isn't going to be the first guy you think of or the second or the third. I just want to highlight some of these underrated seasons these players have had since the year 2000. And a lot of these players were balling when I started watching basketball too, so it's giving me some good nostalgia. And if there's a player you want to highlight for your favorite team, please let me know in the comments below. Also, use code SROS, SROS on Underdog Fantasy. Link to that is in the description to play fantasy throughout the NFL, NBA, college football seasons. Let's get into this. So I started watching basketball in 2005, and the Knicks were horrible. The Knicks were pretty much one of the worst teams in the league for the first 7 years of my life of watching basketball, but they had this one guy that always just cared. He always gave 110%, and I thought he was really underrated as a Knick. He was the 30th overall pick in the 2005 NBA draft, and he was an all-star with the Knicks as well, and that's David Lee. David Lee ended up spending 5 years in New York, and this was a phenomenal draft pick for them. He wasn't much as a rookie in this league, but you wouldn't really expect that out of the 30th overall pick. And then in year number 2, he averaged 11 points and 10 rebounds for the Knicks as the starting power forward. Over the last couple of games of the year, he ended up finishing 10th in most improved player voting and 4th in Sixth Man of the Year voting. And then he did pretty much the same numbers in year number 3 with the Knicks, but he really broke out, finishing 7th in most improved player voting in 2009, where he averaged 16 points and 12 rebounds, and then did even better in year number 5 with the Knicks. In the 2010 season, David Lee was an all-star. He got some Defensive Player of the Year votes, and he ended up scoring 20 points a night and 12 rebounds, shot 54% from the field, played 81 games for a Knicks team that ended up going 29-53. Yeah, it was horrible to watch as a Knicks fan at that time. I love David Lee though, and then instead of re-signing him, they traded him to Golden State for Ronnie Turioff, Anthony Randolph, and Kleiza Azubuike. Yeah, one of the worst trades ever, and I was just in a dark time as a Knicks fan as a 10-year-old. I really wanted to talk about Brook Lopez for the Nets and just kind of go back to what he was early in his career, but I think everybody knows of Brook Lopez as a Net. So I want to talk about Devin Harris, who was the point guard for this team before they ended up getting Darren Williams. Harris ended up spending 4 years in New Jersey after starting his career in Dallas. He played in over 200 games for the New Jersey Nets, and over the course of those 4 years, he averaged 17.5 points and 7 assists a night and shot 42% from the field, and that's pretty much what the guard play was back in the 2000s. But he had a phenomenal 2009 season with the New Jersey Nets, where he was an all-star and finished 2nd in most improved player voting, and he averaged 21 points and 7 assists for a rebuilding Nets team, and then was included later on in that Darren Williams trade in 2011. For the Boston Celtics, you could talk about a couple guys here, but I want to talk about somebody they drafted in the 2010 NBA draft that at his peak in the league was one of the best guard defenders and kind of better than anyone at that, and that was Avery Bradley. Avery Bradley was the 19th overall pick in the 2010 NBA draft out of Texas, and Avery Bradley really wasn't much of an offensive prospect coming in, but really developed into being a perfect 3-and-D piece for Boston in the mid-2010s as they were entering in the post-Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce era, and he had a really good 6-year stretch with Boston before he ended up getting traded to Detroit in the 2018 season. Over the course of 7 years in Boston, he averaged 12 points, 3 rebounds a night, over a steal a night as well, and shot 37% from 3, and like I said, was just the pinnacle 3-and-D piece, and I'm kind of shocked he ended up out of the league as early as he did. He last played with the Lakers in the 2022 season. I'm going to talk about someone that won a Finals MVP, but not with Philadelphia, but he was on the 76ers, and that is going to be Andre Iguodala. When I started watching basketball, you had Iggy, Drew Holiday, and Lou Will all kind of balling out in their younger years for the Philadelphia 76ers, and Andre Iguodala, who was drafted by Philadelphia with the 9th overall pick of the 2004 NBA draft, was such a defensive stud for them before he ended up going on to Denver and then Golden State, winning a Finals MVP with them. He spent 8 years in Philadelphia, and he averaged 15 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds a night. He shot 46% from the field. He was kind of inconsistent from downtown, ended up shooting 33%, but this man was such a good defensive player. He got Defensive Player of the Year votes in almost every year in Philadelphia outside of the 2010 season. He was an Iron Man as well. He played 82 games in 5 out of his first 6 years in the NBA. He was fantastic in 2011, making his first all-defensive team, and he was an all-star in 2012 before he was included in that 4-team trade that sent Dwight Howard to LA, Nikola Vucevic to Orlando, Andrew Bynum to Philadelphia, and then Iguodala went to Denver for a year. Toronto doesn't have a super rich history because obviously they were an expansion team in the 90s, but a player for them that was just a floor general, kind of their point guard of their era before Kyle Lowry ended up going to Toronto, and that is going to be Jose Calderon. Calderon was an undrafted player and debuted debuted with the Raptors in the 2006 season. Really wasn't much for that team that year, but then in year number 2, got some most improved player votes, got some 6th man of the year votes, and he never made an all-star in his career, but this dude was one of the best floor generals for his time. His last full 5 years in Toronto, he ended up playing over 340 games. He averaged 11 points, 8 assists a night. Like I said, one of the better floor generals in the league, and was really efficient. 48% from the field, 40% from 3 on 2.5 attempts a night. He shot 89% from the line. He was a solid defender, and he was a really fun point guard option with Andrea Bargnani and Chris Bosh in Toronto. It's kind of hard to figure out who this could be for the LA Lakers because they were so good in the early 2000s with Kobe and Shaq, and then obviously with Kobe and Pau Gasol. But there were some dog days for them in the mid-2010s when Kobe was at the end of his career. They ended up drafting guys like Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram and D'Angelo Russell, but they had a really fun microwave scorer off the bench and started for them at times, and that's going to be Lou Williams. Lou Williams spent 2 years in LA, but was kind of fun to watch during those times as well and kind of turned his career around completely. He was really good in Philadelphia. He was kind of stagnant in Atlanta, and after that 2014 season in Atlanta, people thought he could possibly be out of the league eventually. He goes on and wins 6th man of the year in Toronto in 2015, and then gave the Lakers a really good year-and-a-half span from 2015 to 2017, where he ended up averaging 17 points for them and shot 43% from the field and 36% from 3, and then they were able to flip him for a first-round pick later on eventually. I don't know, I just really enjoyed watching Lou Will on some very bad Lakers teams. Speaking of having some dog days, the LA Clippers, before getting Blake Griffin in the 2009 draft and trading for Chris Paul eventually, were a pretty disappointing team to watch every single year, but they had a really good power forward for his time, and that was Elton Brand. Elton Brand spent 7 years with the Clippers after getting drafted by Chicago in the 1999 draft and only spending 2 years there, and over the course of those 7 years for the Clippers, he averaged 20 points and 10 rebounds a night, tagged on 3 assists, a steal, and over 2 blocks a night as well, and shot 51% from the field, and was phenomenal in that 2006 season with the Clippers, where he got MVP votes, finished 7th in that voting, was on All-NBA second team, was an All-Star, finished 10th in Defensive Player of the Year voting, and averaged 25 points and 10 rebounds for a Clippers team that was actually fun to watch again. And they actually went to 7 games in the playoffs, led behind Elton Brand in that 2006 run, but they did lose to Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns. Speaking of the Phoenix Suns, I want to talk about a point guard that they had that was just super saucy, and that was Goran Dragic, who actually recently retired from pro basketball. Dragic had 2 different stints with the Phoenix Suns. He was drafted by them with the 45th overall pick in the 2008 draft. He was actually traded from San Antonio to Phoenix on draft night, and then he ended up getting traded to Houston in that 2011 season, spent a couple years there, and then went back to Phoenix and really shined for 2 years. And I want to talk about that 2014 season specifically, where he ended up winning Most Improved Player, where he averaged 20 points, 6 assists, and shot 41% from 3 and 51% from the field. He also had over a steal a night and made All-NBA third team as one of the better players on a revived Phoenix Suns team when they had all those guards at that one point, and they went 48-34 that year. But the West was just loaded at the time, and unfortunately they didn't make the playoffs. Young Rudy Gay was a bucket for the Memphis Grizzlies. He debuted with them in the 2007 season. He was the 8th overall pick in the 2006 draft, and I think when everybody thinks about the Memphis Grizzlies, you're going to think of grit and grind era, right? You're going to think of Mike Conley, you're going to think of Marcus Gasol, you're probably going to think of Tony Allen and Zach Randolph before you think about Rudy Gay, who was a really good scorer for them from 2007 to 2012. He ended up getting traded to Toronto in the 2013 season, but before that, 7 years with Memphis, he averaged 16 points, 5.5 rebounds, and shot 45% from the field. And outside of his rookie year, in year number 2, he averaged 20 points a night, 19 points in year 3, 20 points in year 4, 20 points in year 5, and he was just a consistent bucket for Memphis, and he was a top 10 pick in that 2006 draft that had massive disappointments in it. Let's talk about one of the best dunkers of the 2000s, and that's going to be Jason Richardson of the Golden State Warriors. I also wanted to mention Baron Davis for this Warriors team as well, but I just really enjoyed watching Jason Richardson play basketball. He was just an athletic freak. He was drafted by the Golden State Warriors with the 5th overall pick in the 2001 NBA draft, and he ended up playing his first 6 years with the Golden State Warriors, and he was really good as a shooting guard for them. He averaged 18 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists a night, and was really elite from basically 2004 to 2006. Those 3 years with the Warriors, he was a consistent bucket. He was averaging over 20 points a night, and he was putting on a clinic with his dunks. But yeah, shout out to Baron Davis and those We Believe Warriors. For the Sacramento Kings, we're going to talk about young Kevin Martin. And obviously, Kevin Martin was known for being in that trade for James Harden that sent him from Oklahoma City to Houston, but Kevin Martin in his early Kings days was a lot of fun to watch. He wasn't much as a rookie. He was the 26th overall pick in the 2004 draft, so they didn't really expect a lot lot from him. Year number 2, he flashed a lot. He was a good three-point shooter. He was super athletic in the half court and really broke out in year number 3, finishing runner-up in most improved player voting and averaged 20 points for the first time in his career and was really efficient as well, 47% from the field and 38% from 3. And as the Kings were kind of moving into a new era, post Vlade Divac, Stojakovic, Bibby, and Weber, Kevin Martin was just a fun player to watch. And before he got traded to Houston in that 2010 NBA season, his final 3 full seasons in Sacramento, 22.5 points, 4 rebounds, and shooting 40% from 3, Kevin Martin was a bucket in Sacramento. This next player that we're going to talk about, he wasn't an all-star. He didn't debut in the NBA until his age 27 season for the Houston Rockets. We're going to talk about Luis Scola. Shout out to Argentinian legend Luis Scola, man. He was honestly just super reliable for the Houston Rockets. From 2008 to 2012, 5 years with the Rockets, he played the most amount of games you could play in a year, 4 out of those 5 seasons, and he was a crafty scoring power forward. He averaged 14.5 points, 7.5 rebounds a night, and shot 51% from the field doing so. He got some Rookie of the Year votes when he debuted as a 26-year-old because he played a lot of professional basketball in Spain before coming over to the NBA. For Dallas, we're going to talk about Jason Terry, who gave them 8 really good seasons. He started off being a reliable starter for them and then transitioned into a bench role in that 2008 season, and he ended up finishing 5 straight seasons top 3 in 6 Man of the Year voting and actually won the award in the 2009 season, where he averaged 19.5 points and shot 37% from 3 on 6 attempts a night for the Mavericks, all off the bench, and was a vital part to their 2011 championship team. Jason Terry is one of the more underrated three-point shooters of all time. When I actually think of a San Antonio Spur after the year 2000, right, you're going to think of Duncan, Parker, Ginobili. I'm going to talk about somebody that was a vital part to their 2007 championship team, and that's going to be Bruce Bowen. Bruce Bowen was a dog defensively. He didn't debut until his age 25 season because he played in France, he played in China, he was an undrafted player and debuted with the Miami Heat in 1997. He bounced around on a couple teams after that and really landed a home with the San Antonio Spurs in 2002 and turned into a defensive beast. He was really good defensively with Miami in 2001, and then from 2002 to 2009 with San Antonio, he made an all-defensive team in his first 7 years in San Antonio, multiple all-defensive second teams, and then ended up making 5 straight all-defensive first teams and had 5 straight top 5 defensive player of the year finishes. He also shot 44% from 3 in 2003 and was just an elite 3-and-D player. And when I talk about vital parts of championship teams, he definitely was that in 2007. The Pelicans/Hornets don't have a ton of history, but David West was really good for them in the 2000s. He was with them when they were the Hornets, and then when they became the Pelicans. He was drafted by New Orleans with the 18th overall pick in the 2003 NBA draft, a very notable draft. He didn't really do much in his first 2 years in this league, and then he ended up finishing runner-up in most improved player voting in 2006, where he averaged 17 points and 7.5 rebounds. Including that year, his final 6 years in New Orleans, in over 400 games, he averaged 19 points, 8 rebounds a night, and was an all-star in 2008 and 2009, and was a really fun pick-and-roll partner with Chris Paul in his final days in New Orleans. I swear I could mention this guy for like 4 different teams in this video, but I'm going to use them for the Charlotte Hornets because they don't have much history either. And we're going to talk about Al Jefferson. Al Jefferson was the best player that the Hornets front office paired up with Kemba Walker during his time as a Hornet, which is kind of sad, but he did spend 3 years in Charlotte, and he averaged 22 points in his debut season with Charlotte and finished 8th in MVP voting and finished on All-NBA third team. He shot 51% from the field that year, 11 rebounds, and then he was still good in 2015 and 2016, but his play started to drop off a little bit. But that 2014 Hornets season is one of their best seasons individually in franchise history. And yeah, you could mention Al Jefferson for Boston, Minnesota, and Utah as well. He ended up becoming overpaid at one point, but he was definitely worth this contract he got. I'm going to talk about Hassan Whiteside for the Miami Heat. Whiteside has a really cool story as well. Went to multiple high schools, and then ends up becoming the 33rd overall pick in 2010 by the Sacramento Kings out of Marshall. He really wasn't anything in the first 2 years of his career. He ended up playing in the D-League at the time, and then played in Lebanon, and played in China and Lebanon again in 2014. And the Miami Heat signed him in 2014 in that summer, and that turned out to be one of their best moves, honestly, since 2014. Immediately in his first year in Miami, averaged 12 points and 10 rebounds and finished 15th in Defensive Player of the Year voting and finished 4th in Most Improved Player voting. And then his second year with the Heat, all defensive second team, 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting, and he led the NBA in blocks with 3.7 a night. He averaged 14 points and 12 rebounds with the Miami Heat over the course of 5 years. His career didn't really work out after Portland in 2020, but hey, Hassan Whiteside made his money with the Miami Heat, and he had a really cool journey getting there. For the Atlanta Hawks, we're going to talk about someone that was just a high flyer and so much fun to watch, and he was just a beast in Atlanta Hawks, because you could talk about guys like Horford, Millsap, Teague, Joe Johnson, Kyle Korver. I'm talking about Josh Smith. Josh Smith was the 17th overall pick in the 2004 draft and had a very up and down rookie season, but man, after that became so much fun to watch and was a beast of a defensive player. In year 3 of Atlanta, up to his last year in year number 9, he was a beast. He averaged 17 points, 8.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists a night, was a little bit of a point forward, 1.4 steals, 2.1 blocks, and shot 47% from the field. And like I mentioned before with Jason Richardson, he was putting on an absolute clinic with dunks every single night. The Orlando Magic built a perfect team around Dwight Howard in the late 2000s and early 2010s. They just kind of went to him inside and surrounded him with pretty good shooters, right? And one of them is the guy I'm going to talk about, and that is Hedo Turkoglu. Hedo was the 16th overall pick in the 2000 draft by the Sacramento Kings. He was solid for them in the first 3 years of his career, ended up playing in 2004 with the San Antonio Spurs, and then signed with the Orlando Magic in the 2004 offseason, and that was one of their best moves in the Dwight Howard era. He actually had 2 stints with the Orlando Magic, and his first 5 years with them, he averaged 16 points, 4.5 rebounds, and shot 39% from 3 on 4.2 attempts a night, and was phenomenal in 2008 for them, where he actually won Most Improved Player, averaged 19.5 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds a night, and shot 40% from 3. The Washington Wizards haven't had too many great players since the year 2000, right? Like, you've had John Wall and Bradley Beal. They had Michael Jordan, Agent Zero. I could talk about Marcin Gortat for this video, but I'm going to talk about Antoine Jamison, who was really good for Golden State. He was the 4th overall pick in the 1998 NBA draft. He spent 1 year with Dallas after Golden State in 2004, and then was traded to Washington in the 2004 offseason for a guy we mentioned in this video, Devin Harris, Christian Laettner, and Jerry Stackhouse. Those are some names. And he spent 6 years in Washington and was really good for them. He was a good partner with Agent Zero, Gilbert Arenas there. He averaged 21 points across those 6 years, shot 45% from the field, 36% from 3. He was an All-Star in 2005 and then again an All-Star in 2008 and got some MVP votes as well. And he was a reliable Wizard for one of their best years since 2000. When I say Rasheed Wallace, you probably think of him as a Detroit Piston. I'm going to talk about his Portland Trailblazer days though. He was drafted by the Washington Bullets with the 4th pick in 1995 and then ended up getting traded to Portland in the 1996 offseason for Harvey Grant and Rod Strickland, and spent 8 years in Portland where he made 2 All-Star appearances in 2000 and 2001, and multiple years where he averaged over 19 points a night, and was a floor spacing power forward as well, where he had multiple years shooting above 35% from 3, and then obviously went on to be such a vital part to Detroit's championship team in 2004. For Utah, we're going to talk about Mehmet Okur. Remember him? I forgot Okur's numbers for Utah, and they're really good, honestly. He ended up playing his rookie year in Turkey after being the 30th overall pick in the 2001 draft, spent 2003 and 2004 with Detroit, and then signed with Utah in the 2004 offseason and was a really good Jazz over the course of 7 seasons. For those 7 years, he averaged 15 points, 7.5 rebounds a night, 2 assists, and shot 46% from the field, but was kind of an elite 3-point shooter for a big man at that time. Shot 38% from 3, including a year in 2009 where he shot 45% from 3 on 3 attempts a night, and he was also an All-Star in 2007 as well. Mehmet Okur was a real solid Utah Jazz in those times with Andre Kirilenko, Paul Millsap, Carlos Boozer, Gordon Hayward all being around. It's tough to think of a Thunder, so I actually am going to talk about a Seattle Supersonic. Rashard Lewis was a beast for them. Lewis spent 9 years in Seattle before signing with the Orlando Magic in 2007. Lewis spent 9 years with Seattle before getting traded to Orlando in the 2007 offseason. He was the 32nd overall pick in the 1998 NBA draft, so he was a second rounder. He had a forgettable rookie season, a solid year too, but broke out in year number 3 for Seattle in the season 2001, and from 2001 to 2007, he averaged 18.5 points, 6.5 rebounds a night, and shot 39% from 3 on 4.5 attempts a night, and was an All-Star in 2005 for them. I remember Lewis as an Orlando Magic, but he was a real good player for the Seattle Supersonics. For the Denver Nuggets, we're going to talk about UMass legend Marcus Camby. Marcus Camby was the 2nd overall pick in the 1996 draft by the Toronto Raptors, spent the first 2 years of his career with the Raptors, and then the next 4 with the Knicks, but was such a good defensive player for the Nuggets from 2003 to 2008. I don't know why the Knicks let him go. I mean, I don't know why they made 99% of their decisions at that time. And his time in Denver over those 6 years, 10 points, 11 rebounds a night, and 3 blocks a night as well. He led the NBA in blocks in 2006, 2007, and 2008. He won Defensive Player of the Year in 2007 as well, and finished runner-up in 2008, and was one of the best defensive players in the NBA during that span. I'm sure most of you remember this season, but if I have any excuse to talk about this season, I'm gonna do it. And I want to talk about 2019 Blake Griffin. This is definitely gonna be the most recent season to date that we're gonna mention in this video, but I just want to talk about Blake, who ended up getting traded to Detroit in the middle of the 2018 season after he just signed a massive extension with the Clippers the offseason prior. They sent him from Southern California to Detroit. He didn't play too many games with them in 2018, but 2019 Blake Griffin was arguably the best Blake Griffin we have ever seen. He finished on All-NBA third team. He was an all-star. He should have got MVP votes. He had 24.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists for Detroit, shot 46% from the field, 36% from three, and led the Pistons to a playoff appearance, basically carrying this whole team. And unfortunately, though, he sold his soul for that season because he didn't have a season that was pretty much good again in his career. Remember Pau Gasol being a Chicago Bull? If you do, you probably remember he was really good for them in the small stint he was there for. Pau Gasol was obviously great in Memphis and Los Angeles, and then he left the Lakers in the summer of 2014. He spent 2015 and 16 with the Chicago Bulls and was great as a Bull. He was an all-star in both years. He was also on All-NBA second team in his first year in Chicago in 2015, where he averaged 18.5 points, shot 49% from the field, 46% from three, 80% from the line, and also had 12 rebounds a night, and he helped the Bulls go 50 and 32 that year. And yeah, just remembering Pau Gasol and the Chicago Bulls is kind of cool. First NBA video games I started playing were the NBA Lives in 2006 and 2007, and a player that I love to get in my fantasy drafts in the second round that I pair up with either like Kobe or LeBron or Melo would be Michael Redd of the Milwaukee Bucks. Michael Redd was a bucket for the Bucks. He was drafted with the 43rd overall pick, a second rounder in the 2000 draft. He had a forgettable rookie season, had a solid year 2, improved again in year number 3, where he averaged 15 points, and then broke out fully as a star scoring the ball in 2004. And from 2004 to 2009, across 6 seasons, he averaged 23.5 points, 4 rebounds, and shot 45% from the field and 37% from 3. There was a stint where Michael Redd was one of the better 3-level scorers at the shooting guard position in the league. I had some trouble figuring out who I wanted to talk about for the Indiana Pacers, and I never, I think, mentioned this guy's name on the channel, and he was really good. You probably remember him, and it's Jermaine O'Neal. There was one really good Peja Stojakovic half season in Indiana I could have talked about, but I want to talk about Jermaine O'Neal. He was drafted by Portland with the 17th overall pick in 1996. Obviously, he shared the same last name as an NBA legend, and he was great in Indiana. His second season in Indiana to his last full year across 6 seasons, he was an all-star in all 6 years. He won Most Improved Player in 2002 on All-NBA third team, All-NBA third team again in 2003, All-NBA second team in 2004, and then should have made an All-NBA team in 2005 where he was an all-star and averaged 24 points and 9 rebounds, and was a dominant big man for the Pacers in the early 2000s. Is this the best player that ever played with LeBron in Cleveland? Is it Mo Williams? Because that's who we're going to mention here. Mo only spent 2.5 years in Cleveland, but his first year at Cleveland was really good. He was an all-star, he got some Most Improved Player votes, and he averaged 18 points and 4 assists a night, shot 47% from the field and 44% from 3. He was fine in 2010, but he did the Cavs a solid. In 2011, they traded him to the Clippers in exchange for Baron Davis and their first-round pick, and that first-round pick turned out to win the lottery and got the Cavs Kyrie Irving. And the last player we're going to talk about is going to be for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that is going to be three-point shooting stud Wally Szczerbiak. Wally was the 6th overall pick in the 1999 NBA draft by the Minnesota Timberwolves and was one of the best players, you could say, him or Sam Cassell, that played alongside Kevin Garnett in Minnesota. He broke out in 2002, finishing 6th in Most Improved Player voting, and was an all-star, 19 points a night and shot 46% from 3. And he was just a reliable shooter and complimentary piece to Kevin Garnett in Minnesota, but obviously it couldn't prevent them from trading him to Boston. And that's gonna be for me. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. This was fun talking about every team's kind of forgotten star since 2000. If you guys did enjoy this, I would appreciate if you drop a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments anybody I should have mentioned for your favorite team. I tried doing this alongside, like, yes, obviously if you're a fan of these teams, you know this player that I talked about, but maybe if you're not a fan, you're like, oh, I didn't realize he was that good for that team. And that's gonna be for me. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.